The following broadcast is a presentation of Mount Zion Media Ministry.
Subject of the sermon this morning: maximize the moment. Get ready for what's coming after this. Maximize the moment. Get ready for what's coming after this. You may be seated in your hearts, those of you that stood for the word in your heart and in posture. Past few weeks, we've been looking at the children of Israel and their plight in Babylon. They were living through a disruption to their regular way of life. They were living through their own pandemic. And in the midst of that pandemic, we discovered over the past few weeks that there were basically two crowds that had to be dealt with. The first crowd was that crowd that was in Babylon, living in the midst of their disruption, their pandemic, who had become hopeless, felt like there was no change coming, there was no way out. They were doomed to captivity in Babylon, and the life they once knew, and even the idea of a better life, was lost. And then there were those who were living with false hope, believing that their disruption was temporary, it would not last long, and would have little impact on their life. And so they made no changes, no adjustments to life. They were just sitting back waiting on something to happen without doing anything to make something happen. And their false hope was rooted in prophecy from false prophets that said to them, God told me to tell y'all that this thing was not going to last long. It was not going to be impactful. Don't get accustomed to this Babylonian way. Don't comply to the Babylonian rules. Just take it easy. And after a while, God will come through and change this situation. But then the prophet Jeremiah comes along and says to those people, listen, that hope you got is false, because God did not speak to those prophets. Instead of prophesying, they're prophet-lying. And y'all do know we got some prophet-lying going on now, don't you? Some folks saying stuff that's really not true. And in some instances, they know it's not true before they say it. But they just want to trick you. But I hope you're smarter than that. And so he tells them, forget that. God didn't say that. And so now those who had false hope end up being hopeless too. And so the two groups become one. And God does not want his people to live in hopelessness. And so he sends Jeremiah with the right message. And I am saying to everybody under the sound of my voice, in the midst of this pandemic that we are in the midst of the cover being taken off of all of these disparities that we've been talking about, the injustice in so many ways, the inequity in so many ways that we've seen, and you go back and listen to the other sermons and you can hear all that, but we don't want to become hopeless in our situation, in this disruption that we are in. And God sends us hope just like he did the children of Israel. Don't give in to it. Don't give in to the fear. Don't give in to the hopelessness. Don't believe everything you read in social media. Did you know there's no requirement, no legal requirement, and in some people's mind, no moral requirement to ensure that anything they post is the truth? I can go in there right now and post anything I want to, whether it's truth or not. And there are people who will read it and believe it. But listen, don't you be hoodwinked and let what somebody posts about something drive your mental state. And so, what is the hope? He says to them, I need you to settle down. You're going to be there for 7 years. But while you're there, I need you to strengthen your position in that community that you're in. I want you to grow and not increase. I want you to become more influential. I want you to create more wealth, create more influence. And I want you to prepare yourself because one day I'm coming to get you. And I need you to be ready for what's coming next. And now let me go take you to the text to prove all that I just said. I told you we got to maximize this moment because something is coming next. And if you're not ready for what's coming next, we're going to miss it. And being able to take advantage of what's coming after this, and this won't last always, we got to do what we need to do right now. Look at the promise in verse 10. And so in verse 10, God says through Jeremiah, listen at him, this is what the Lord says, not me. You will be in Babylon for 70 years. But then I will come and do for you all the things I have promised, and I will bring you home again. Let me unpack that verse for you to show you something. The first thing I want you to notice that that verse tells us is that every situation we go through is time stamped. What do you mean time stamped, Pastor? I mean God has put a beginning and an ending date on it and stamped it. And listen at me closely. When God puts the time stamp, you and I cannot alter it. And nobody else can alter it. When God puts that stamp, this is the beginning and this is the end. He's the only one that can change it. And so God says, here's the time stamp, 70 years. Start counting. From the time you were captive and brought here until the end of 70 years, that's how long this will last. Here's the joy in that. Whatever it is you're going through, it ain't going to last always. And what I have to live with and you have to live with is that God has time stamped it, and sooner or later, just like I came in it, I'm going out of it. And I can never let my mind, you can never let your mind trick you to believing that whatever it is, it's going to always be that way. Whatever it is, that weeping endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. That's a promise for transition. And so first thing in there I want you to see is that whatever it is, that situation you're in, this pandemic, this disruption is time stamped. And let me tell you something. Stay informed, listen to the little briefings if you want to, but let me tell you something. When somebody give you a date and say it's going to end here, don't believe that. They don't control that date. Here is the other thing that I want you to see. Their captivity delayed but didn't derail the promises of God. See it right there? But then I will come and do for you all the good things I have promised, and I will bring you home again. Here it is. Prior to the captivity, God made some promises to bless them. To bless them in the nation of Israel, and those promises were disrupted because of their behavior toward God. He told them not to worship anybody besides him, and they did. He told their leaders how to be responsible and act like godly leaders, but they didn't. He told them to obey his commands, but they didn't. And he tried to correct them just by talking to them, but they didn't respond. And so God had to discipline them. and take them out of Israel, put them in Babylon to get their attention. If you will, it was their switch that God used to whip them. But just because this disruption came and God had to put them in Babylon didn't mean the promises God made had been derailed, that God would not fulfill his promise to them. Just meant it was delayed. And don't miss this, it was delayed because of their own behavior. Did you know the children of Israel coming out of Egypt, it took them 40 years, but according to the distance they had to travel, they could have done it in less than 3 weeks. But God calls them the one. It wasn't derailed, the entrance into the promise. It was delayed because of their behavior. 70 years delayed because of their behavior. I ought to stop right there and ask myself, is some of what God promised me being delayed because of me? Is it that God can't bless me with what he promised me because I'm not ready for it? Because I've demonstrated in my past behavior that I won't manage the new blessing that he give me. Let me ask you, could it be that your blessing is delayed because you're not ready? Because you've demonstrated to God that you are not ready to handle what he gives you? So he delays it in a moment to discipline us, to get us ready for it. But that 10th verse teaches us it might be delayed, but not derailed. And so I got to keep hope alive. Let me just share this with you too, so you'll understand why these folk should have been happy to hear that. Because God promised them to make them a great nation, that he would bless them to be a blessing, and whoever blessed them would be blessed, whoever cursed them would be cursed, to give them houses they didn't build, to let them harvest crops that they didn't plant, to give them a land flowing with milk and honey. And all of that represents the blessings and the bounty of God overflowing. And brothers and sisters, you and I need to understand that God has made us some promises too. All right, let's look at verse number 11. And so like them, our blessing is not derailed, just a little disruption by what's going on. Listen, God says, for I know the plans I have for you. Talking to Israel now. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and not a future and a hope. Can I just unpack that for you? God has a plan for you and for me. He had a plan for them. And his way of giving them hope is saying, listen, I know what the plan is. You don't know, but I know. And I need you to place your hope in the fact that I have it. I need you to be in a place where you don't have to know what the plan is, but just know that I got a plan. And drop your anchor in faith in the plan that I have for you. Can I get you, can I say to you listening to me in the virtual world, in the sanctuary, can you drop your anchor? Place your hope in the fact that you know that God has a plan for you. I don't know what the future will bring. It is uncertain. But what I do know is that God has a plan for me. I am not going to give up. I am not going to give out. I'm not going to give in, no matter how dark it seems, because God has a plan for me. Somebody else may have a plan. I'm not concerned about that one. But God has a plan for me. Those leaders that got that assessment, if you remember, we were asked just to project out over the next 6 months. And usually we are planning 20, 30, 40 years in advance. You know, back 2000, we had a 2020 plan. We can't, in this situation, predict anything 10, 20 years, not even really 6 months, because we don't know what tomorrow will bring. But I'm so glad we don't have to know, because there's somebody, and his name is God. His name is Jehovah Jireh. His name is He has a plan for your life. Pastor Simmons, is it a plan to hurt me? Listen, God is not that kind of God. Look at verse 11 again, and he tells you in general what his plan is. He said they are plans for good and not disaster. That's God talking to the nation of Israel. That's God talking to us. It was for them, and it's for us. God has plans, and this is future now, for good. After this, there's some good coming. After this, there is a door here, a door there, that's going to be open, that creates an opportunity, you got it right, for good, for us to do good. And there are some doors that are going to be open for us to be good and to have good. And while we are preparing in this situation and doing what God has told us to maximize the moment, he is getting ready what's behind those open doors. God said, I got plans for you, for good and not for disaster. You know why he put that disaster there? Because again, they were hopeless and they thought that their current situation was going to destroy everything. But God said, no, that is not the design of this disruption, this pandemic you're in. I got some good after this. I see him sitting over there, Albany State's coach, and the football season has been lost. And I know it's hard for him to see the good now. But after this, Coach, God has a plan. And after this, the good is going to come. And then he says, to give you a future and hope. I don't want you to miss the language. Every word is important. God says, my plan is to give you. And y'all help me now, because you know I'm not smart like some of y'all. But if God is going to give it to me, then I don't have to create it. If God is giving me the future, it's not mine to make. If God is going to give me hope, that in the King James Version, that last word talked about an expected end. If God is going to give me an expected end, if God is going to plan an end game for me, and then take me to it and through it, what am I fretting over? Why am I worried about the future? If I drop my anchor, put my hope in the plan that God has for me. And he said it is to give me a future, not just a good future, but a good future. And a reason to hope, because he's going to bring that expected end to pass. In other words, everything God originally had is still going to come to pass. And when is it coming? After this. Well, Pastor Simmons, what is my part? My part, your part, our part is to maximize the moment while we're in this pandemic, in this disruption, to prepare ourselves, to strengthen ourselves for what's going to come after this. Not to sit down and wallow in misery and pity. He said to them, settle down, build houses. Let your sons and daughters marry. Let them have children so that you will increase and not decrease. Work for the welfare of the city you're in. Pray for the welfare of the city. Pray for it to prosper, because as it prospers, you will prosper. Position yourself. Listen, when they got ready to go home, they were going to need influence. They were going to need resources. They were going to need the skill levels to build what needed to be built back. And they were getting ready for all of that while they were in Babylon. So that after the 70 years had ended, they were able to go home and restore their country. And God had opened a door for them to be able to get everything that they needed. But they had to be ready. Now we're in the book of Nehemiah in Bible study. And you remember how Nehemiah went to the king. And the king said, what do you need? You see his influence? He says, I need a leave of absence. And by the way, I need you to give me a letter to the keeper of the forest, because we're going to need some timber. We got a wall to build. And everything he needed was given to him, because God had already worked that out. And I'm telling you, all the resources we're going to need for this next move of God, God has already worked it out. Let me see if I can just make this practical for you, because I know some of you scratching your heads. I don't know what Pastor Simmons is talking about. So let me see if I can make it plain for you. Let me start with the church. So I read this book a long time ago, in 1999, called Megatrends. And it talked about how in 2000 and beyond, technology would come in and change the way we do things. And it had this phrase, high tech, low touch. It meant that people were accustomed to the touch of another human being, to human interaction. And technology would take that away. And so we'd have this high-tech stuff, but low touch. You'd be doing stuff online. You do stuff over the phone. You won't talk to a human being. You won't be able to connect to a human being. And the book said that the long-term effect of that was going to be some neurotic behavior. And for some people, even some deep mental health issues, because we are created for human connection. And once that is lost, the intimacy, the connection of another person is lost, we start having issues. And so check it out. After this, because what this pandemic did is ushered in even deeper high-tech, low-touch. And so you're going to have children who have become trained and taught through Zoom or some other technological manner that will miss the all-important love and touch that a teacher can give. And you can't give that online. You got to give it in person. You got people, grown folk, old folk like me, old folk like you, who are engaging in business now, and we're missing the opportunity to have engagement with people. And so we are missing all of those benefits of the human touch. And long term, we're going to have some issues. And let me just say this, I appreciate it for the moment, but I don't want to live like this because I had some issues when I had a doctor's appointment and we did telemedicine. How you feel? I need you. Put that thing in your ear. Tell me to call so you can listen to me. You telling me if I could figure all that out, I wouldn't need you. What's your temperature? And of course I didn't tell the truth because he asked me, you been checking your blood pressure and what the average? Man, I have been checking my blood pressure on the regular, but since that's what you want to hear, yeah. Because I'm not letting you increase my medicine. So it's been good. And it had been good. And so what is happening is what high tech has done, we now have people that that's saying have truth. And here's that. They said we have these relationships, but we're not relational. Mentioned to y'all the other day, it was the Tuesday crowd, how I hadn't been in a bank since February. I've been doing it online. And according to my bank, I have a banking relationship, but they are not relational. And because over time we've not been relational, my commitment to them has dwindled. I don't feel connected to them because when I went in the bank, Karen talked to me. She called me by name, Pastor Simmons, how can I help you? And if I needed something, they would take it. But I don't get that online. In fact, they want me to authenticate my identity every time I go on there. They got to send me a text and I got to put in a number to prove that I am who I am. I don't have to prove that. And listen at me, y'all better hear your pastor. We're going to have some social and emotional issues with people after this. Our sons and our daughters, our marriages, in every way, we're going to see some issues surfacing. And I can tell you, as I've kept my grandchildren in the latter part of the year, we had Daniel, and I did his Zoom classes with him every day. His social skills have not been developing according to schedule. Because his socialization is with me. With his mama. He hadn't seen and interacted with other children.
Thanks for watching. Be blessed and continue walking in the light.